Welcome to the Q&A Cafe here at the Georgetown Club in Georgetown. And very, very happy to have you here. It is Halloween week, and in the spirit of Halloween week, I'm going to try to scare us all as much as I can with our esteemed guest, Samantha Vinograd. We'll get into all the many hats she's worn and wearing now. We know each other professionally, but we are friends outside of that, and it's always good to have a girlfriend who knows how to handle an AK-47, right?
Here to help.
Here to help. Sam, I'm going to start by saying this is an area where I feel like such a dummy, you know, national security, homeland security. I mean, because it's coming at us so fast. So when I ask a really dumb question, you can say so. But I don't know, has anybody here seen House of Dynamite or just me? Okay, good, there's a few of you, because I asked Sam to watch it, but then I realized she probably doesn't need to because she knows about it in real time. It's a terrific new film. It's on Netflix. It was directed by Catherine Bigelow, who did Zero Dark 30 and The Hurt Locker. And it's about an ICBM strike on, and there could be an IBM strike on Chicago. And the thing that really got my attention, it's like, you were too young when 9/11 happened, but there was a film done called Flight 93, and it went through the whole story of what happened with Flight 93. But at the beginning of it, they have all the people in their positions who track threats and the layers at which they all communicate. And the way they all come together, or try to. With 9/11, it wasn't so successful. But that's a very gripping part of, for sure, the first third of this film. It's as information spreads and who gets added to the layers. And the more layers is an indication of just how serious it is. So without you having seen the film, I was just curious, is that how it really works? Does it start with one person who sees something on a screen and goes, well, that's unusual? And then who do they tell? How many layers are there before it gets to the president?
Well, I'll answer your question, but not to give away my age, I actually wasn't too young on 9/11. So you all can do the math, but I actually...
You're pretty young.
The only reason I'm actually involved in this space is 9/11, so I'm going to put her on the spot, but my best friend is here. We met at the University of Pennsylvania. I was in freshman orientation when 9/11 happened, so you can work backwards to my age. I had no idea what was happening on television. Like, you know those big box TVs we used to have?
Yeah.
I was like, there's planes flying into a building, and they're from Saudi Arabia, but this is linked to Afghanistan, and I had no idea what was happening. And you know about my father. My dad is a 96-year-old Holocaust survivor who, from a very early age, told me that the worst thing anyone could possibly be was uncurious. I don't even know if that's a word, but that's how he described it.
But it says
and
a lot.
There's a saying in French, il n'est pas interdit d'être intelligent. It's not forbidden to be intelligent. And what that means is, if you don't ask questions, that's on you. And being called curious was the highest form of flattery in my house. So 9/11 happened, and I decided I wanted to learn about what happened. And coming from a family that was business people, I decided I wanted to work for the U.S. government. I had no idea what that meant, so I thought you could only be a spy because there was a show. Do you remember Alias?
Yeah.
Do you remember that show Alias with Jennifer Garner?
Yeah.
Such a good show, but I was like, if you want to work for the government, you should be a spy. So all that to say, I was never a spy, I swear. I had a long career in the U.S. government, but 9/11 and that curiosity actually led me to want to get involved in all this. Layers on layers and layers. So how it normally works is, yes, someone sees something or hears something, and that's called raw intelligence. It could be a single person. It could be a single encounter. It could be a single blip on a radar that gives someone a sense that a missile is coming, there's an attack that's going to happen, there's an espionage operation that we need to learn more about. And then there's a group of people that are what we call read in, which means that with classified information, even if you have a security clearance, that doesn't mean you can just walk in and say, I want to know about who murdered Kennedy, or I want to know if there are aliens. you have a security clearance, and then you have to have what's called a need to know classified information. It has to be related to your job. There needs to be a direct correlation between what you're doing and why you have access to that information. So when someone sees something concerning, more people are read in. A lot of the times that's intelligence, and that intelligence is vetted. People corroborate it using different sources. They talk about it, they analyze it, they assign something called a confidence level. How confident are you that this is real, that this is actually something you should trust? And then ultimately, the goal with intelligence is to provide that to what they call their customers. The president is the intelligence community's #1 customer. Ultimately, intelligence analysts will say they've had a really good day if their work makes its way to the White House. And I remember my friends that were intelligence analysts would say, oh my gosh, the Secretary of State read my piece, or oh my gosh, the president read my piece this morning. That's a huge achievement for them. And ultimately, so policymakers are read in, they read the intelligence, and then they decide what to do with it. You could have the best intelligence in the world. If a policymaker doesn't do anything with it, honestly, it serves no purpose. And on the flip side, if there's bad intelligence, if someone sees something and it's not right or it's not vetted and it makes its way all the way to the top, we've ended up going to war for the wrong reasons.
But you vet everything.
In my experience,
Or we vet everything.
in my
Or one should.
experience, intelligence is thoroughly vetted before it makes its way to senior policymakers. I think, though, a lot of that depends on how a president chooses how to use their intelligence community. Intelligence is ultimately, it's at the president's, who's ever elected, it's at the president's discretion how intelligence is used or isn't used. So we've had presidents, we have presidents that make major decisions based upon a gut feeling. We have other presidents that maybe overanalyze intelligence before making a decision, but it's really up to the president how much he relies on what the intelligence community is providing versus just saying, I understand the situation, I'm going to go
He's the
do what
last
I want.
stage.
Or the first stage.
Or, well, one thing about this film is I'm not going to do spoilers, I promise. It's all in 18 minutes from the time that it's first detected to when they say impact will happen. And they employ DEFCON. And, you know, we all go around saying, oh, that's a deaf country, that's a deaf country. But they do use DEFCON. I don't know that everybody really understands what that means. Will you please explain?
Sure, we don't use it. It's a more a military term, but it has to do with the level of threat affecting the country. How serious is it? If you're on DEFCON 1, oh my gosh, the Earth is about to explode. We have to do something. But the reality is, in a lot of very tense national security moments, you don't have time to assign a DEFCON. What you have to do is get the right people in the room, have someone authorized to make a decision, make a plan, and then be really sure people are going to execute it. So I remember this is one of the worst nights of my life. Does anyone remember what happened in Benghazi, Libya?
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I was in the West Wing when that happened, and I remember we started to get, it's now unclassified, but raw intelligence about something horrible happening in Benghazi. And to your point, we started reading in more people, and then a core group of people, and this was in a matter of minutes and hours, gathered in the Situation Room and tried to figure out how to try to save our colleagues at the consulate in Benghazi. We didn't have time to assign a threat warning. We just knew we had to come up with a plan and try to save as many lives as possible. So it depends on the nature of the threat, if it's kind of what we call a no-notice or short-notice event, or if it's something with a longer tail, like, you know, the war in Ukraine. We knew it was going to happen. About 6 weeks out, we got indications of how soon it was going to be, and then you can assign a threat level, but sometimes it just happens really quickly.
Does popular culture portray the Situation Room accurately ever?
I think they do. I think I've seen some good depictions of it. What they don't depict is how often people go in and out. So these meetings in the Situation Room, I think the longest one I was ever in was probably about 4 hours or so. People go out to do phone calls, come back in, that sort of thing. But I think the portrayals are pretty accurate. What I think is hard to understand is just how many meetings take place in the Situation Room every day. Because we all know the president gathers his national security team, what we call the cabinet, and the National Security Council. But then you also have the number twos that meet. They're called the deputies. they oftentimes meet multiple times a day. So sometimes you'll walk into a deputy or a cabinet secretary and they've spent their entire day in the Situation Room meeting on different topics, and to struggle sometimes going to the actual meetings in the sit room, as we call it, and then actually getting the work done after the meeting, and that's always a balance.
It's sort of the ultimate skiff, isn't it? I mean, so there'd be a reason to have meetings there where you need to get a multiple number of people in.
Yes, we hope one of the most secure sites in the United States, and there's all of these video screens. So I've been in meetings where you'll have people dialing in from like 6 different time zones. So a lot of the times for these, operational military matters, you want to have the Secretary of Defense, you want to have the Chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, and then you want to have the commanding general in the field giving you operational updates. So there's oftentimes you always try to find a time that's convenient for everyone, but it'll be, 3 o'clock in the morning in Jerusalem and God knows what time in other time zones, and everyone comes together and just tries to come up with a plan.
Lots of coffee. So let's...
And M&M's, sorry, I should say.
Oh, yes, I know.
Pre-COVID, the
Yeah.
best part of the Situation Room for those of us with a sugar addiction was there was a giant bowl of M&Ms before you went in. And when you knew it was going to be a long meeting when people would show up like double fisting cups of M&Ms for sustenance, but it worked.
Did they still have them in the boxes with the president's name?
Not in the bowl because of COVID.
Clearly,
but in the
I
boxes.
haven't been there in a while since I'm asking that. Well, let's go back a little bit about you because you have a fascinating personal story, and to start it in a simple way, you were a woman in the war zone, and how did you get to the war zone? What was your path? You didn't become a spy, but you ended up in a war zone. So talk about that.
Yeah, I wanted to be a spy. I was waiting to be a spy, and while that process was going on, I got offered a job by the Department of the Treasury, which frankly I didn't even know did this kind of work, to go deploy out to Iraq for a year, 07 to 08, to work on advising the Iraqi government on fiscal and monetary policy and counterterrorism and finance. And so I deployed out to a war zone, incredibly excited about being on the ground and getting to experience a new culture. I was studying Arabic at the time. And honestly, I think I was 24.
How long out of college then? Like just a year?
2 years. I went to
years.
grad school and then straight out to Iraq. I had no idea what the U.S. Treasury Department did. I thought I did, and then I got there, and this was right after the surge. Over 100,000 U.S. troops there. Every single U.S. government agency you can name and that you probably haven't even thought of on the ground. Not to mention so many foreign governments. I worked with the Danes, I worked with the Romanians, the Poles. There were a lot of Uzbeks there. I mean, it was just an incredible, United Nations on the ground in Iraq. But as a young woman, it presented challenges that I couldn't even wrap my head around at the time. I was coming from being a grad student in Georgetown, hanging out literally around here at a bar called Smith Point that used to exist.
Oh gosh, yes, right down the street.
Going
I'm
to
sorry you didn't say Nathan's though.
going to Georgetown, and then got dropped in the middle of a war zone. And you and I have talked about this, Carol, but there were really 2 choices for women in that war zone. You could either choose to be a flirt and to play on that, or you could be labeled as aggressive. It was a very zero-sum framework that women were given in the war zone. And I can think of 3 other women that I still remember that were there. It was just such a male-dominated environment by nature of the military and just who chooses to deploy out to a war zone. But I remember someone took me aside and said, those are the 2 ways that women are regarded in this war zone. As a flirt, or you can be aggressive with sharp elbows, another phrase I hate when describing women. And that felt pretty unfair. I don't think anyone ever sat down the men and said, these are your choices. There's a spectrum, of course.
How did you establish you were qualified? Was there a moment when all of a sudden they realized, oh yeah, she's here, she's good, she can do the job?
I just started working.
Yeah.
I think that I've been lucky. I've had so many different stages in my professional life, and you and I know each other from TV, but I remember when I first started doing TV, I had what is often labeled as imposter syndrome. Why am I up here? Why isn't someone else up here? And I got really good advice, which was if they wanted someone else to be up here, they would have called somebody else. And so I did on TV what I did in Iraq and what I did at the White House and elsewhere, which is I just start working.
How were you trained to go to the war zone, though? What did you need to know that you didn't know?
The only training they gave civilians, which I actually think is a huge disservice for those of us going in from a safety perspective and then coming out, there was no counseling or anything. They gave us defensive driving training. So, side note, you don't do a lot of driving in a war zone, but I remember they took us to a driving range. This was 2007. They took us to a driving range and told us how to do these really neat maneuvers in Suburbans if you're caught in a chase with terrorists in the middle of the war zone. That's the opposite of the training that we needed. So that's what they gave us. The biggest threats we faced were really mortars coming in and things like that. But as civilians, we got pretty minimal training and really nothing on the way out.
You got weapons training, right?
They took us to a shooting range with an AK-47, taught us how to shoot over the course of a half hour, and that was it. But we weren't allowed to carry weapons. Well, it was so you were trained to shoot an AK-47 if someone else's fell off, I guess, and you picked it up and shot someone. But
Did you feel you learned how to use it?
I did at the time. It's been a while.
It's been a while. So how long were you there?
I was there for a year, and then I did some time in the United Arab Emirates. And then begrudgingly came home. I say begrudgingly because for those of us that have deployed out to war zones, you get addicted to it. And so I really didn't want to come home. I remember I called my parents and said, I forget where it was. I think I was going to go to Pakistan or Haiti or something. And they said, just come home for 6 months, take a breath, and then if you want to go, we'll support you. And I came home, and one thing led to another, and I didn't deploy back out. But the adrenaline can be quite addicting.
Since you're a single parent
Yes.
and a solo parent, or the same thing, did you meet women there who had children back home? And would you recommend that? I mean, could you go be in a war zone now being a parent?
I couldn't, but one thing I've learned as a single mother by choice is everybody approaches parenthood differently. So I could not do that. I have friends that have deployed out to war zones with young children, and I think being a single parent by choice, people make so many assumptions about why some people embrace parenting, some people don't, I remember when I showed up pregnant at the Department of Homeland Security, I got a lot of, oh my God, we never thought you'd want to be a mom. Or I had a good friend come and say, I never thought you'd be a sit on the floor kind of parent. Things like that. Like people just make so many assumptions. One of the things that I've really taken to heart is parents all make their own choices about what's best for them and their kids. So I wouldn't, but I know people that have.
Yeah. Well, do you think it's harder for parents to go be deployed to a war zone, though?
I think
male or female. I mean, it's.
I cannot imagine what it's like, and I have so many friends that have done it, to leave your children and not be able to hold them.
Yeah.
And it's an incredible thing that we ask of so many men and women in this country.
And hard on the children.
Yes. And
as they get older, yeah.
I think every family's different. I have a lot of friends that are military brats that have deep bonds with their parents despite multiple deployments, and huge kudos to them.
Did Treasury bring you back to Treasury?
They did, and then the White House stole me.
Yeah, as what?
Another thing I didn't know that you could work for the Treasury and go to Iraq. I didn't know what this thing called the National Security Council was. Honestly, I had no idea. Like I said, my parents ran a steel company. Like, we never interacted in government stuff, but I was working in the Treasury Department on, I think it was Yemen, and got a call to go over to the White House for some meeting. It was
Which is literally across the sidewalk.
Yeah, that the National Security Council was holding, and went over to this NSC meeting. The National Security Council is actually a group. It's two things. It's a cabinet when they meet with the president on national security issues, but it's also a group of people. The size has varied, a couple hundred. It's much smaller now. It's a group of people, and their job is to coordinate all the national security work across the government agencies that work on that stuff. So I went over and I was they called it a director for Iraq. So I worked on, again, at the time, there's so much focus on what was happening in Iraq, policy and operations related to Iraq's economy and energy sector. Then I did.
And this is Bush administration.
This was Obama now.
Already
I started under Bush. I was career under Bush and Obama. Then I did some international economics, and then I worked for a guy, one of my greatest mentors in life, named Tom Donnellan. He was the national security advisor. That's you and I think actually met way back when I was working for him a million years ago. But I worked on a little bit of everything then: Iran, China, counterterrorism. It was an incredible role to have at such a young age. And then honestly,
Such a great mentor to have.
I got tired,
Yeah.
and so I left government service for a bit and went to New York.
And was that when you were at Goldman Sachs?
I did, yes.
Which is its own kind of
It's my boss at Goldman
universe.
Sachs. Yeah, he joked I was the only person that came to Goldman Sachs to sleep more, because most people sleep so little there. But I loved Wall Street. It was such a high-paced environment in such a different way. And I remember the first day I got to Goldman Sachs, the guy that hired me took me aside and said, "Okay, I think you're really smart. Obviously, I hired you, but everything you think you know about policy, forget for 6 months." I said, "What are you talking about?" He said, "You've never been client-facing. You don't understand what it's like to generate revenue. Spend time with clients, understand how businesses run, understand what shareholders mean, understand what investors are looking for, and then put the two halves of the pie back together, and you'll have a cohesive perspective." And that was really good advice.
And what
actually.
did you? And so when you put the two halves together, what did you come away with?
I came away with the fact that both perspectives are very necessary.
Yeah.
I think it's, is anyone in the room a former government official? So I don't know about you guys, but whenever I leave government, sometimes it's a little hard to feel a sense of impact in the private sector. It always just takes me a couple months because I went back into government and then came out a second time. It takes me a couple of months to reconfigure what impact means in the private sector versus the public sector.
Mm-hmm.
So after that time, putting those halves together, just realized that we need all parts of this ecosystem for the country to function.
Mm-hmm.
Economic growth, employment, infrastructure, and then the government folks. I think it's really important we have those different players.
Both sides need each other.
They do. One wouldn't work without the other.
And do you think both sides need to learn more about each other? I mean, do you try to do that now that you've gone back? I mean, is that a role you've chosen?
Less so
Or
with
at
this
least apply it?
administration, but generally, yes.
Yeah.
I think that, well, although this administration has so many folks that come from the private sector in
do.
there, I think that could be a huge asset. I think one of the I'm half French, and in the French system, they don't operate this way, but in the U.S., like I was career. I was appointed for life basically under Bush and Obama, and then I left, and then I was able to go back as a political appointee. I think it's so neat in our system that you can have different chapters in government and go back in with new experiences. And I do think that being a political appointee, wherever you are, Department of Energy, Treasury, Commerce, White House, you bring in such a different perspective, having been, for example, in a revenue generating environment, or at DHS, I had colleagues that had worked in the immigration advocacy space, like seeing the different ways that real people are impacted by policies and operations and all of that, and then bringing that back in, I think makes our government function better.
Have you had a security clearance?
I have had a security clearance, yes.
And what's that like?
It is a huge responsibility. I'm not gonna lie, also I should say, it's really cool, right? Like, you get used to it, but it is really cool walking into, we call it a SCIF, Sensitive Compartmented Information Facility, something like that, a SCIF, and opening up a big book that says top secret, classified, and looking at both raw intelligence, so stuff we picked up, and then analysis of what's happening. That's really cool.
Yeah.
I think that it is the toughest part with intelligence and then with being in the security space overall is there's so much tactical stuff that you get intelligence-wise, like there's this terrorist-related threat or this bomb or that, but it's actually the strategic part of it, like what are the longer-term shifts that you have to take the time to actually read at the back of the briefing book that takes some discipline, but it's really cool and it's a big responsibility.
They have a scene in House of Dynamite where the fellow or person who travels with the president and carries
The briefcase.
Yes, takes the book out, and then they're going through the book. I mean, I don't know who's the president's reading it, the guy's reading it. Did your level of security ever allow you to see what's in that book?
Parts of it.
Parts of
It's
it.
the president's daily brief. It's
Yeah.
every day, and Obama I think got his on an iPad, but every day, waiting for the president whenever he gets to the Oval Office or wherever he is in the world, there is a binder of the most classified information in the country and it's what the Director of National Intelligence feels the president has to read that morning. Out of everything in the world, what he has to know to start his day and conduct his day, the president and various other members of the cabinet can ask the intelligence community, like, hey, this issue is really important, can you write something up? But otherwise, the DNI, the Director of National Intelligence, makes that call.
So when did you get your security clearance? When you were at Treasury or when you went to the White House?
I got mine originally with Treasury, and then there's various, but it transferred over to the White House. But then when I went back in under Biden, I had to go through a new process to get that.
Do you have dual citizenship with France?
So I had dual citizenship up until I joined the Bush administration. Okay. I informed the French government I was giving up my French passport to get my first security clearance.
I was going to wonder if this was an issue.
When I left government service in December 2023, we call it read out. I was read out of my security clearance. I did not have an active security clearance, even though there were some public stories about it being revoked. I never had it. I gave it up in December 2023, and I got my French passport back once I left government service.
Can your children have French citizenship also? Oh, that's a very happy story.
So if you ever can't find me, I will be in Provence teaching at a local community college and hanging out at my sister's house.
So I know what it's like working in media and keeping up with the pace of events, but when you're working in the bubble, really, of the White House, what's it like trying to keep up with the pace of events? How do you balance work life and personal life? Or can you? Or you just have to hang out with people who have the same job?
I had no personal life when I worked in government. So I could lie and say I balance and this and that. I had no personal life when I was at the White House. I didn't see my friends, barely saw my family. When I was at DHS most recently as the Assistant Secretary for Counterterrorism, Threat Prevention, and Law Enforcement Policy, literally never saw my friends or my family. And I just knew that going in. And then I decided to have my first daughter, and that changed everything. And so
were you in? You were at DHS
I was at Homeland
then?
Security. Yes.
And you went into DHS with Obama as president?
No, I went with Obama as president. I was at the White House. I went into the private sector, where I started doing TV by accident, to be honest. We can talk about that. And then went back under Biden to Homeland Security. I told them I'd do a year. It ended up being 3. Probably the best job I've ever had at Homeland Security, believe it or not.
Can I ask you a Biden question?
Yes.
I mean, I may ask more, but there's all kinds of noise that we're dealing with about the auto pen. Do you have any thoughts on that? I mean, you were around Biden. What do you think about the accusations that everything he signed with an auto pen?
I think it's a little bit of a red herring. I have no idea whether he did or he didn't, but every president has an auto pen. I think the question is whether and what any president is actually reviewing and agreeing to. So anything that a president is required by law to sign or wants to sign, there is a person in the White House called the staff secretary, and their job is to bring in whatever form the president wants the documents for the president to review. If the president actually signs it with a pen or not, candidly, I don't care. What I care about is whether the president is involved in the decision-making about whether something should be signed.
Well, there's levels of things that get signed as well.
Sure, there's letters to stakeholders.
When my son was born, he got a letter from George Bush because we had a friend who worked for him, and I assumed it was the auto pen, but I didn't care.
I hope that George Bush was not signing birth letters. No, seriously, right? They have a lot to do.
Letters to a mother with a new child.
Right, but there are on big decisions.
Big decisions.
The issue for me is whether the president is making the decision, by which in a lot of cases he's required by law to do, or if he's subordinates doing that. In terms of whether he physically signs or not, that's less relevant to me personally. But I know there's a lot of focus on that lately.
Oh, there's a lot of focus on so many things that we could get into, but we'll step carefully. But speaking of carefully, you are on TV. You've been on TV. This is an era where having a high profile is not always as comfortable as it might have been once upon a time. Do you get any threats? Have you ever gotten any threats? Do you worry about that? Do you see the randomness of some of the political violence now? And does it make you think about what you say when you're on TV?
I still have a restraining order out against a stalker that I had from my CNN days. A really terrifying incident. So yes, there's certainly been a range of threats.
Was this person purely civilian, or
Yes.
did they have any connection
Purely
to the government?
civilian.
Purely civilian.
Really, really troubling period for me. Really scary period for me.
Right.
He's now AWOL, but still have he came to DC on multiple occasions to try to find me. He had delusions that we were married and dating. Terrifying. But yeah, definitely did a lot more threats when I was at CNN. And do I worry about it? Sure, I worry about it. I think that there's the actual security threats. And I dealt a lot with what we call politically motivated violence when I was at DHS. And I think we can talk about what causes that, but everything is so black and white these days. Either you're with Trump or you're against Trump. Either you're pro this or anti that. And I don't operate that way. I don't operate in a zero-sum framework. There's nuances to everything. And I think on television, not everyone, but folks fall into this trap of being pro or against, right or left, et cetera. And I think that's one of the reasons that we've had this incredibly polarized, or that we're in this incredibly polarized moment. But yes, I very much worry about my security, my family's security. I do think that being lucky, I'm so lucky to be on, in the media. It has led to political retribution, which comes with its own security risks.
Yeah.
And I hope that goes away, but it doesn't feel like it is.
Well, and that's sort of the other part of my question. Seeing the climate that we're in, when you see people getting indicted for retribution, has it at any point made you think twice before saying something, just because it might get on the radar and make you a target of political retribution?
So I think two things on that. One is I think you know this because you read the notes I send. I neurotically over-prepare for every television segment I do. One, because I always want viewers to walk away learning something new. And two, because I want to make sure I get things factually right. Hence the egregious notes that I send ahead of any Face the Nation segment. But I want to make sure that I'm being analytically accurate. And if I offer an opinion, it's grounded in analysis and not just like Twitter research. I think one of the biggest things I worry about for my children is like people, and I'm guilty of this too, like critical thinking is not scanning social media, whether it's Twitter or TikTok or whatever the kids are using now. And I worry for my kids that they're going to think that that's reading and researching, when no, there's books and there's podcasts and there's think tanks and this and that. So I try to make sure my analysis is accurate so that if I am attacked, I can actually see, no, like this is literally what happened.
Yeah, but that's hoping you can rely on facts.
Yes,
you know?
But yes, I'm worried about it. But I also feel like if silence is the point, I don't want to be complicit in that.
Yeah.
Or fear is the point.
It's a tenuous time, and I mean, we both know Chris Krebs. He's appeared here as a guest on the Q&A, and one day you wake up and you're a target, and it affects your life entirely. And when I think about people who are out public facing, if they're going to get quieter, and when we need them not to be quieter, talk to me about, there's a few things that I'd love to have you just explain that were part of your role at DHS, and I'm sure you've taken them into what you're doing now. Now, this sounds kind of simplistic on my part, but it's not, because I think these terms are really about something. Counterterrorism. Counterterrorism, is it here, there? Is it domestic, foreign? Is it all of it? How do you manage, how is that a role? How is that a hat you wear?
So when I started in government, we talked about counterterrorism is what we call foreign terrorism. It was Al-Qaeda, then ISIS, then all of its branches. Yeah. At DHS, my role was foreign terrorists operating overseas, people here that were either directly contacted by foreign terrorists or were inspired by what they were seeing, propaganda they were digesting, and said, I'm going to join ISIS and go blow up a synagogue in this community. The biggest challenge, however, was domestic terrorism. And what I mean by that is we have individuals in this country, Americans, who have no nexus to a foreign terrorist organization, but that are radicalized based on various ideologies. They're racially motivated, they're ethnically motivated, they're politically motivated, they're environmentally motivated. I mean, there's a spectrum of things. And when I first started, the domestic terrorist threat was huge. January 6th is one example of that, but I cannot tell you how many plots we uncovered that never made the news. And the challenge with domestic terrorism is, in this country, of course, we have the First Amendment. And figuring out, from a legal perspective, what's First Amendment protected speech, and when an individual is going to go from First Amendment protected speech to getting a very accessible weapon in this country and going and engaging in violence is really tricky. And there's just many more privacy-related issues dealing with Americans and First Amendment issues than dealing with foreign terrorists. The interesting thing about the terrorism landscape today, and I think you'll probably see this when you watch the news after too many of these horrific school shootings and faith-based institutions of violence there, is a lot of the folks mobilizing to violence today aren't actually mobilized by just one thing. It's not like they're anti-fill in the blank. People use the metaphor of a salad bar. It's a salad bar of hateful ideologies. They just like pick from this, pick from that. And when you try to understand why they were so angry at so many things, it's just hard to pull together all the pieces because it's a mix. I say the metaphor I use is actually alphabet soup because there's a letter this, letter, and that makes it very complicated to detect these folks before they act. Most of them are what we call lone wolves.
I was just going to ask, aren't they the most frightening in a way?
Yeah, so a lone wolf is a term we use for a single person who becomes radicalized to violence mostly by alone. If they're in communications with folks, it's on these encrypted platforms mostly in the dark corners of the internet. So the way you find them is there are confidential informants that the FBI uses in various places, but a lot of the times you hope that a family member or a loved one recognizes a sign of troubling behavior and asks for help, even if it's not criminal behavior, asks for some sort of social service support, mental health support, or otherwise.
Threat prevention is a very broad spectrum, but I'm particularly interested in drones.
Oh yeah, you know I love talking about drones.
Well, talk about drones.
Drones are great, right? I mean, we use drones for such important things. We use drones for law enforcement, Amazon delivery, but also natural disasters, putting out fires, investigations. Like, drones are awesome. We really need drones. The problem is, in the United States, drones are so cheap. They're really fun. I mean, I lived in San Francisco for a year, and I felt very uncool because I did not own a drone. Everyone had a drone for fun. But in this country, there's an explosion in drones in what we call our national airspace. And there are a range of threats associated with drones. Drones are used for espionage. Drones are used to actually blow stuff up, like infrastructure. Drones are increasingly being used to ferry drugs. Fentanyl is so light. They're being used to carry narcotics across the border and other forms of sabotage. And very few parts of the U.S. government have both the authority and the equipment to mitigate drones. And let me share. I remember I was testifying once, and a member of Congress said, "Can you just give people law enforcement bazookas to shoot these things out of the sky?" That's not how you mitigate a drone. If you shoot a drone down, all that debris falls on the ground and people get hurt. You actually disrupt the radio signal and safely land it. But there's not enough law enforcement professionals that have those tools, and it's creating a bit of a risk.
AI.
Yes.
That's another threat that's growing on a daily, hourly.
Can I interrupt you with one thing, though? But with AI like drones, it's an opportunity and a threat, and that's what makes it so tricky.
And then law enforcement policy. Where does that come in DHS?
Post George Floyd in particular, but generally, there was necessarily a very important look at how our law enforcement personnel can be best positioned to perform their missions based upon the range of threats we were seeing. So use of force, generally, various mission sets, and importantly as well, after January 6th, what role is federal law enforcement playing versus state and local law enforcement? What does the coordination look like between all these different parts of the law enforcement community? So, there's a lot of attention right now on crime rates in certain cities. The president's perspective has been to call in the National Guard. When I was in government, calling in the National Guard was actually a last resort for a lot of reasons. Instead, it was, who do you have? We call it a mutual aid agreement. What neighboring police departments can you call in to help? Who actually has a training to do riot control or crowd control or what have you?
A little less aggressive, a little more comprehensive or thoughtful, perhaps?
And just who has the best training for a particular situation, and who's going to be just best equipped to accomplish the objective.
Did you oversee ICE when you were there?
No.
No.
I worked a lot with ICE on, I didn't oversee them, I worked a lot with ICE after the Afghanistan evacuation. And then ICE is responsible, in addition to, folks that are here illegally, but if there's an individual that's here, whether illegally or lawfully, that's a foreign national, and they have another government term, DROG, derogatory information associated with them, that means that they could be a criminal or a terrorist. ICE works with the FBI to apprehend them and to take them into custody. So worked with them a lot on all of that.
We only have a couple minutes left, and I want to use them in a timely way because we do have some elections coming up next week, and then we have midterms coming up next year. This is an area where you have a lot of expertise. How worried are you about the integrity of our elections coming up and a year from now?
I am less worried about the physical integrity of our voting infrastructure. So I think there's been a bit of miscommunication out there, perhaps purposeful by some and not by others, which is our election, and we have no reason to think our election infrastructure itself has been hacked, that votes have been changed. I still have deep concerns about the ability of a range of bad actors to use disinformation, false narratives, to either cause panic, to portray inaccurate representations of various issues. So I think our elections are very susceptible to false narratives.
And the disinformation component of it, do you worry that, like Steve Bannon is saying that Trump should run in 2028. He says they have a plan. There is a narrative out there that if you flood the zone with enough idea of fraud, it can become self-fulfilling. Does that concern you? Do you think that can happen?
It concerns me because those false narratives have led to violence against a range of people and led to an insurrection, if not a riot, at our Capitol. So I worry about the actual security implications of those false narratives. In terms of actual what comes next after that, I think, I still have a healthy dose of optimism in our judicial processes. I think we really need our courts to continue serving their functions so that any allegations of a rigged election are examined by people that are unbiased and a judge presides over a case in an unbiased fashion.
We can hope. See how fast things go and you're having a good time?
Yes.
It's been wonderful having you as a guest. I hope I scared you just enough, not too much. Or actually that Sam did. But thank you all for being here. I hope you'll come back to our next one with Jake Tapper. And thank you very much, Sam.